Thank you, Valerie, for your imaginative initiative in setting up this elaborate forum. I'm afraid that I may be not following the plan exactly as you propose it, because I cannot teach aesthetics in this form. Teaching for me has always been a kind of communication with individuals, with people, a kind of exchange, and it's not a one-way process. It's not a lecture. It's a participatory engagement. So what I plan to do then is to talk about what I try to do and what I hope I succeed in doing in teaching aesthetics, and why I teach it when I teach it. Perhaps the first thing to clarify is that I don't teach aesthetics as a philosophical discipline. I try to teach aesthetic experience, aesthetic perception, aesthetic awareness, or more precisely, as I like to term it, aesthetic engagement. And aesthetic engagement is not a one-way activity. It's a reciprocal process. And that will become clear as I continue to elaborate on in my presentation. It's reciprocal because I think that there is a exchange that goes on in the process of aesthetic experience, aesthetic appreciation, aesthetic perception. So as Valerie mentioned, I think of aesthetics as first philosophy. It's first because it presupposes nothing else. It starts out with perception as such. And of course, one cannot presume to have pure perception. What is pure perception? I think this is perhaps a perceptual psychologist's ideal, but it's direct. It's a perception that we have. This is what we start with, and I think of aesthetics being, I'm guided very much by the word itself, by its Greek meaning is perception by the senses. Aesthetics has to do with sensory perception and how we engage with it, how we participate in the perceptual process. So it's first philosophy because it's what comes first. Perception is what comes first. I don't think there are any innate ideas. There are any preformed structures. I believe that we begin with the undifferentiated perceptual possibilities of a normal body. So if we think of aesthetics as perceptual, beginning with perception, it's and recognize that there is a value contained in this experience, in this perceptual experience. What aesthetics is the study of this experience and the values embodied in it. I believe that this underlies all subsequent philosophical inquiry, and it provides a sound and healthy grounding for further philosophical inquiry. So that is why I think of it as first philosophy. One thing I should mention at the very start is that experience is not predetermined. It's not, how shall we say, subjective. It's not internal. It's relational, I believe. And relationality means that experience is contextual. We are not only embodied, but we are embodied in situations and responsive to situations, responsive to the circumstances in which we find ourselves. And so this perception is I hesitate to use the word subjective because I think subjectivity is one of the banes of philosophy, but it's certainly not internal. Perception is a contextual activity, a process, an organic, conscious activity in a context, in relations. And that, of course, many of our relations are social and socially related, socially connected, so that this is part of our perceptual context. Well, what is that experience? I believe that aesthetic experience is not an internal perception, but it involves expanding one's self, going out of oneself, unbounded, enlarged, relational, engaged. It's contextual, and I think this has. I will try to explain as I go on how this is related to the more conventional settings in which we talk about aesthetics. That is, in relation to the arts, in relation to situations in which we recognize what we ascribe value to, social aesthetic value. So to proceed further, the experience is an enlarged, unbounded, expanded, relational, engaged experience. And so, and it's not, it's not an internal, not experience in as a subjective internal event. It's reciprocal. It's contextual, and I use the word engaged because it connotes connectedness and responsiveness. So to more or less summarize what I've been saying so far, I consider aesthetics as originating in perceptual experience and originating in perceptual experience. And I've been, and in this respect, you might say I'm taking a very classical view because I'm returning to Baumgarten's choice of aesthesis, perception through the senses, as central. So however we proceed, wherever we are led in our inquiry, we should never forget the central place of sense perception in aesthetics. And of course, as I've noted, we recognize there is a value in this perception. It's not always neutral, but it's a value that we regard as significant, as important, as desirable, as worth cultivating. So I can conclude my first point by saying that this leads to thinking of aesthetics as the study of values embodied in perception. Now, the next dimension of this that I would like to talk about in understanding aesthetics and an understanding that underlies the teaching of aesthetics is aesthetic perception, more in a more developed way. What is aesthetic perception? What is it? Is it besides or more? Is it anything more than developing awareness and sensitivity in to perceptual experience? I think it is through such experience that we fashion our world, we fashion our understanding of our world. And to teach aesthetics then is to articulate and communicate this grasp of perceptual values, recognizing these perceptual values. And teaching aesthetics is attempting to share and enable others to recognize their experience of such perceptual values. I will be more specific as I go on, but this is the general framework within which I understand teaching aesthetics to be. Well, now, where do we find such experience most accessible, most direct, most prominent? I think that for people studying aesthetics, it's often identified with the arts, and for good reason. It's through experiencing the arts that we can develop and expand and articulate our perceptual experience. we can develop our sensory awareness. The arts focus such perception. They can help us identify and understand it. Now, of course, the arts is a generic term because there are many different arts, many different art forms, many different styles, many different historical phases that different arts each has gone through, and I think it would help if I talked about particular arts and give some examples to show how the study of experience, deliberate study of experiencing the arts can help develop aesthetic perception. Take music to begin. Musical sound, of course, is varied. It's varied considerably depending upon the culture and history. But to think of musical sound in the context of aesthetic awareness leads us to regard it as something to focus on. Regarding and focusing are, of course, visual focusing is a visual term, but centering one's attention on the auditory experience itself, following with as intense attention as possible the development of sound, the movement of sound, the articulation of emphasis and complex, varying complexity in sound. This would hold true for music of any culture. And instead of letting oneself passively hear the aesthetic attention to musical perception would encourage active attention in listening to the movement of sound, the shaping of sound in tonal patterns, tonal groupings, in the use of rhythmic emphases, in regular pulsations, if that is part of the musical style in the form of meter. So listening to music as a way of developing perceptual capacity is a attentive, focused awareness over time. And of course, in teaching, one can introduce examples of different kinds of music and encourage students to listen to the sounds as such and call attention to features of the sound, rhythmic patterns, melodic phrases, textures, and such. So that sound is not just a blanket audition, but it's an articulated kind of hearing. Then, of course, one often thinks of the arts in terms of visual arts, and the visual arts are, of course, a rich field of examples. I'll use one example that I have used in teaching, to illustrate my point here. When one thinks of, say, the history of Western painting, one thinks of painting as a flat rectangular surface that depicts an image. And one thing I did experimentally in my classes years ago was to try to show how one can not only look at a painting as a surface, but look at a painting as an experience of space and activity. And the example that I chose to use was a painting by Guardi, the 18th century Venetian painter. The particular one is the Piazza San Marco, which is a very detailed painting of the St. Mark's Square, filled with people and buildings, and it looks from a distance as a throng, as just a complex texture. What I did was not only show the painting using slides as a slide, but pick out details and make slides of particular details. And so the painting then breaks up into encounters, things going on among the people who are there. And it becomes looking into the scene, not at the scene, but into it, and following with one's eyes the activities and the articulation of individual characters and differences in this scene. It becomes alive then, and it becomes active, which is an interesting phenomenon. And so the painting illustrates the activity of perception, visual perception in painting. Of course, this can be done with paintings in other styles, other periods, and there's just a rich field of examples available to help students learn to see in the visual arts. Of course, I could go on with example after example, but I would like to talk about environment, which I have done the bulk of my work in. Environment is not an object. Environment is a context. And I never use the term the environment, because the environment objectifies something that is not an object. We are in a context. We are always in a context and related to that context in the various configurations that occupy it. So this can be illustrated using architectural surfaces, volumes, spaces, and so on. I'm afraid that I may be going into too much detail, and I don't want to exhaust my time with examples. But this can be done with all the arts. It can be done with environment. It can be done with environmental experience. I will mention one last example of one thing that I have tried to do with students is to show them how paths and roads are not just lines in space, but they exercise a influence on the body, so that they are sort of what J.J. Gibson calls affordances. They lead us, and so the curve in a path leads us forward to follow that curve. And I would take students out of the classroom, sometimes to the campus, and into places where the paths in the campus move through the area, and to try to show how the path leads the eye and invites the body to move in certain ways. So all of this is participatory perception. Now, what are my goals in doing this? I think there is a value in experience. And the richer the experience, the richer the value. The more detailed the experience, the more complex and rewarding the values can be. I say it's a prerequisite to anything that we do in aesthetics to recognize that it's based on perceptual experience. Therefore, a principal goal in teaching aesthetics is to reveal, to articulate, and to communicate such experience. This means turning to the contexts that embody perceptual experience, like the fine arts, as I tried to show, the practical arts, environmental situations, handling a pot, feeling the bulk of a pot, recognizing the texture of its surface, the glaze, the space that it encloses, the weight of its bulk. These are all perceptual awareness, forms of perceptual awareness that people often don't attend to. But I think teaching aesthetics is to help them to attend to the richness of the world, of the perceptual world, that mostly goes unnoticed. Well, what does this all lead to? What is the value of successfully teaching aesthetic experience. That's a question that cannot be easily answered. And I'm reminded of Spinoza, who ends his marvelous ethics, if I may paraphrase the last lines. If understanding were ready at hand and could be found without great effort, how could nearly everyone neglect it? But all things excellent are as difficult as they are rare. That is my guiding motto. And in doing so, and in teaching aesthetics, I think the goal is not to communicate information, not to give the history of aesthetic theory, not to formulate alternative explanations and turn it into a theoretical inquiry, but to develop awareness, perceptual awareness, and an awareness that never reaches its limit, because its limit is the limit of experience, and there's no limit to experience as long as we're perceptual beings. Well, I've revealed myself in this, but I think that that I'm confident that this is a productive process, that it's a philosophical process, that it's a human process, that it's a social process, and that it's a process that is not limited by any one cultural tradition, but is open to all. And that whatever expands perceptual awareness expands human life, and is that much richer for the process. Thank you.